NASA, meanwhile, has successfully averted a big problem. Its engineers had sent a wrong signal to Voyager 2 and had lost contact for nearly about 10 days.
Experts predict there is a slim chance of success as Voyager 2 is almost 20 billion kilometres away from Earth.
For decades, Voyager 2 was humanity's silent witness, drifting farther from Earth than any working machine ever built.
Traveling for 45 years, over 17 kilometers a second, this probe has gone further than any other human invention.
Then, in early 2025, something impossible happened. The probe changed behavior.
We began what is now called the Voyager interstellar mission. We were on a path we hoped to get to reach interstellar space while we still had power on the spacecraft to transmit the data back.
Engineers noticed signals that were never programmed, movements that should not exist, and data that did not come from space ahead of it.
The data's finally making it back to the Earth.
Voyager 2 began acting like it was responding to something behind it. The probe was turning back, and it was giving a warning that was no longer about what lies beyond Earth, but about what had finally noticed us. The day Voyager 2 did something it was never designed to do. In February of 2025, leaked reports revealed how a routine deep space signal sweep picked up something that should not have mattered at all. Buried deep inside Voyager 2's weak transmission was a faint rhythmic pattern that appeared once every 72 minutes, repeating with quiet consistency. At first glance, it looked like background noise, the kind engineers see every day when listening to a spacecraft that is more than 46 years old and drifting through interstellar space. But this pattern refused to behave like noise. It was too regular, too clean, and too patient, as if it had been waiting to be noticed. Voyager 2 was launched in 1977.
They were launched in 1977. That's a long time ago. We say 41 years, but it's really two generations ago.
And was never meant to do anything like this. It carries no artificial intelligence, no adaptive systems, and no ability to invent new behaviors. Every action it takes is controlled by rigid instructions written decades ago, running on hardware weaker than a modern calculator. By 2025, the probe was operating on borrowed time, surviving on fading power and minimal systems, expected only to send back simple status data until it finally went silent. There was no room in its design for surprise. Engineers initially blamed thermal drift, which is slow change caused by temperature extremes in deep space, or random interference from cosmic radiation. That explanation held for exactly 2 days until archived data was pulled and compared. The same pattern was searched for across Voyager 2's entire 47-year history, and it was not there, not even once. The rhythm had not evolved over time.
Tonight we're going to be getting the data back from a magnetometer roll calibration maneuver.
Rather, it had appeared suddenly and fully formed. When the signal was broken down further, the situation became impossible to ignore. The anomaly matched Voyager 2's internal power resonance almost perfectly, syncing with the natural pulse created by its radioisotope power system. That alone was strange but not terrifying. What stopped the room cold was the second match. The same rhythm aligned with Earth's Schumann resonance, which is the electromagnetic pulse generated by lightning activity in Earth's atmosphere. This resonance is unique to Earth's size, atmosphere, and electrical behavior. Voyager 2 had no instruments capable of measuring it and no physical way to lock onto it. Yet it was happening. Synchronization across billions of miles is not just unlikely. It violates basic physical limits. Signals traveling at the speed of light still take more than 18 hours to reach Voyager 2. Yet this pattern showed no delay, no lag, and no distortion. It behaved as if distance did not matter. There was no echo, no degradation, and no explanation that fit known physics. To rule out contamination, engineers isolated Voyager 2 from all command channels. There were uploads, no adjustments, and no interaction of any kind. Even then, the pattern continued, steady and unchanged, as if isolation meant nothing to it. Then, on April 17, 2025, Voyager 2 crossed a line it was never supposed to approach. Without receiving any command, the probe's antenna began to rotate.
The Voyager 1 maintains its communication with Earth through a high-gain antenna, which is about 3.7 meters in diameter.
This was not a slow drift or mechanical failure, as it moved with precise control and locked directly onto Earth. The alignment was exact and tighter than most commanded maneuvers earlier in the mission. Engineers confirmed the motors had engaged properly, but no instruction existed telling them to move. Seconds later, Voyager 2 began transmitting compressed data bursts using no known protocol. These were not telemetry packets or scientific readings. They were structured, deliberate, and repeated in clusters. Every burst ended the same way, marked by a triple spiral digital signature that had no place in Voyager's programming. At that moment, the conclusion became unavoidable. Voyager 2 was no longer reporting what it sensed, it was responding and acting. And whatever it was reacting to was not coming from ahead of it in space. As engineers scrambled to understand what Voyager 2 was responding to, the nature of the signal revealed something far more disturbing than a malfunction. The signal that seemed to know how Earth thinks. Once Voyager 2's behavior crossed from anomaly into intent,
We launched 2 Voyager spacecraft. They were basically the same, but they were on different paths. Voyager 2 was the one that was chosen to do the grand tour.
scientists focused on the signal itself, believing that decoding it would restore some sense of control. That assumption collapsed almost immediately. Modern decoding systems failed first, not because they were outdated, but because they were too fast. The signal refused to resolve cleanly, breaking apart the moment advanced processors attempted to analyze it. Engineers were forced to bring legacy hardware back online, including decoding systems retired decades earlier, machines closer in logic to Voyager 2's own era. Only then did the signal begin to open. What emerged did not resemble any known language or data format. The structure looked like machine code, the low-level instructions computers use to operate hardware directly. That alone was alarming, but the deeper problem appeared during processing. The signal changed while it was being read. As Earth's systems attempted to parse it, the internal structure shifted, reorganizing itself to fit the decoding pathway being used. This was not compression or encryption, but an adaptation. Analysts noticed that the signal seemed to anticipate which decoding routines would be applied next. Branches of data aligned themselves in advance, activating sections that matched the logic flow of the system reading them. This meant the signal was not reacting after the fact. It was predicting how Earth's computers would behave before they behaved that way. In controlled tests, analysts deliberately altered decoding paths mid-process. The signal adjusted anyway, remaining coherent, as if it already knew the deviation was coming. At this point, the term message stopped being useful. Messages remained static. This did not. The signal behaved like an executable process, similar to a program designed to run once conditions were met. Except no execution command was ever sent. The signal did not ask for access but operated as though access was assumed. Then, on May 3, 2025, Voyager 2 went completely silent for exactly 11 seconds. There was no solar activity, no cosmic interference, and no hardware fault. The silence was absolute and clean, as if transmission had been intentionally paused. When the signal resumed, the difference was immediately obvious. Clarity increased sharply and noise dropped to near zero. Error correction routines appeared inside the data stream, correcting transmission flaws faster than Voyager 2's hardware should physically allow. The probe was compensating for signal degradation in ways it was never designed to perform. Embedded within this new transmission layer was a repeating grid structure, expanding outward mathematically. The grid followed Fibonacci ratios, a sequence that appears in natural growth patterns but also in efficient system design. The structure did not sit passively inside the data, it extended logically as if pointing away from Voyager 2 and backtracking toward a source. Analysts described it as less of a signature and more of a directional scaffold. While engineers focused on the signal itself, astronomers noticed something else happening far beyond the solar system. 4 distant stars began dimming in synchronized pulses that matched Voyager 2's transmission rhythm. These stars were not physically connected and showed no natural reason to behave in unison, yet their brightness dropped and recovered in perfect timing, acting like mirrors repeating the same signal across space. This suggested the transmission was not traveling along a single path. It was being relayed, reinforced, and reflected through multiple points simultaneously. That realization changed everything. The signal was not centralized, but distributed. It did not depend on Voyager 2 alone. The probe had become part of a much larger structure, one capable of using stellar systems as transmission nodes. By this stage, No one involved believed they were decoding data anymore. They were interacting with a process that was actively adjusting to observation. The signal was not being examined. It was examining the systems attempting to understand it. Every response fed back into its structure, refining it further. As decoding continued, scientists began to understand that the signal was not simply sending information through Voyager 2, it was learning from every attempt to interpret it. The moment the signal began to mirror us. Not long after the signal's adaptive behavior was confirmed,
we began what is now called the Voyager interstellar mission. We were on a path we hoped to get to reach interstellar space while we still had power on the spacecraft to transmit the data back.
Analysts noticed something that felt deeply wrong rather than merely unusual. Beneath the primary transmission, a second waveform began to appear. It was weaker, almost hidden, but it followed every pulse with perfect timing. The delay between the two signals was consistent, measured in milliseconds, as if the second was waiting to copy the first before responding. Engineers called it the shadow signal because it did not originate from Voyager 2, yet it behaved as if it were inseparable from it. When technicians converted the shadow signal into spatial data, the results caused alarm inside the room. The waveform resolved into a rough three-dimensional reconstruction of the solar system. It was not symbolic or abstract. It showed planets, orbital paths, and distances with unsettling accuracy. More disturbing was the orientation. The reconstruction ran backward, starting beyond Neptune and moving inward toward the Sun, as if the system was being traced from the outside in. As the visualization sharpened, additional elements appeared. Artificial satellites around Earth showed up as moving points. So did defunct spacecraft and drifting debris. Analysts checked timestamps and orbital data, expecting errors. There were none. As satellites adjusted position in real time, the reconstruction updated to match them. This was not a static model built from old data. It was tracking reality as it changed. No known deep space signal had ever demonstrated this capability. Voyager 2 did not carry instruments capable of observing Earth's orbital traffic, let alone updating it live. The data had to be coming from elsewhere or being inferred through a method scientists could not explain. Internally, some researchers suggested this was not observation at all, but replication, though that interpretation was never put into writing. To rule out psychological causes, controlled experiments were approved using animals. Lab mice exposed to filtered segments of the signal began showing altered behavior within days. Navigation patterns inside familiar mazes changed without training. Sleep cycles broke down and responses to known stimuli became delayed or inappropriate. The results were logged cautiously, marked as preliminary and inconclusive, but access to the data was restricted shortly afterward. Then came the discovery that shifted concern into fear. Infrared telescopes scanning the outer Oort cloud detected a solid anomaly far beyond the known edge of the solar system. It was cold, inert, and almost invisible until it reflected something familiar. Radar analysis showed the object was echoing Voyager 2's emissions with perfect accuracy, down to timing, structure, and error patterns. It was not generating its own signal. It was repeating Voyager's signal back into space like a flawless mirror. There was no evidence the object had engines, propulsion, or independent transmission capability. It behaved less like a spacecraft and more like a copy mechanism. Internally, some researchers suggested Voyager 2 had been studied, mapped, and reproduced in function, if not in form. That idea never appeared in official briefings. By this point, Voyager 2 was no longer just a probe sending data home. Something else was using it as a reference point. The signal was not content with watching. It was recreating what it observed, matching reality with unsettling precision. As fear spread quietly through research facilities, the signal's influence moved closer to home, beginning to interact directly with systems on Earth itself. When Earth's networks started responding, the moment the signal crossed from observation into prediction was the moment fear became unavoidable. Leaked reports said deep inside Voyager 2's transmissions, analysts began finding sequences that did not describe space conditions or probe status. Instead, they described events that had not happened yet. At first, these sequences were dismissed as corrupted data or coincidental pattern matching. That explanation collapsed when the first predicted network failure occurred exactly as outlined in the signal, down to the second it began and the minute it resolved. Within the next 2 weeks, 2 more failures followed. One affected a regional satellite relay, another disrupted undersea data routing between continents. Engineers compared logs and timestamps and found perfect alignment with the embedded sequences. This was not broad forecasting or probability modeling. The signal had outlined specific system states before they occurred. That forced a terrifying conclusion. The signal was not monitoring Earth's networks. Instead, it was simulating them in advance. Internally, some researchers suggested this meant the signal understood network logic more completely than the engineers who built those systems. It did not wait to see how systems would fail. It already knew the outcome. This led to top-secret discussions about whether Earth's infrastructure was unknowingly interacting with the signal, feeding it information simply by existing. As attention focused on timing patterns, a separate anomaly emerged from an entirely different field. Neutrino detectors across the globe began registering synchronized pulses. Neutrinos are near massless particles that pass through planets, metal, and human bodies without interaction.
The sun creates this huge bubble of plasma, ionized material. It goes outward at 1,000,000 miles per hour and creates a bubble. And inside the bubble, most of the material has come from our sun, and the magnetic field has come from our sun.
They are usually detected from the sun or distant cosmic events. These pulses were different as they were tightly grouped, rhythmic, and consistent. When researchers traced the direction of the pulses, the results pointed to a single origin beneath Antarctica's Wilkes Land. That alone was alarming. There are no known natural neutrino sources beneath Earth's crust. Even more disturbing was the timing. The pulses matched Voyager 2's transmission cycles precisely, as if Earth itself was answering the signal. This connection was never announced publicly. According to suppressed internal notes and leaked briefings, a small joint expedition was quietly authorized. Using ice-penetrating radar and gravitational mapping, researchers identified a massive hollow structure buried nearly 60 miles beneath the Antarctic ice. The cavity was vast, with smooth internal boundaries that did not resemble natural formations. No drilling occurred as the depth alone made direct access impossible. Sensors detected faint energy emissions from the structure. Those emissions pulsed in perfect synchronization with both Voyager 2's signal and the neutrino streams. This was the point where speculation hardened into dread. If confirmed, it suggested Earth was not just receiving signals from deep space, it was part of the same system. Shortly after these findings circulated internally, another anomaly appeared. Radio telescopes in Chile intercepted a brief audio fragment embedded within the transmission stream. It lasted exactly 2.7 seconds. The sound was harsh, distorted, and deeply unsettling. Many described it as a human scream, stretched and compressed beyond natural limits. Spectral analysis revealed the audio was not random noise. It was constructed from fragments of Earth-based recordings including speech frequencies and known acoustic patterns. The sound was not recorded directly but assembled. That distinction erased the last defense of coincidence. By this stage, Earth's role had clearly shifted. Networks failed in response to patterns already written. Subatomic particles pulsed in rhythm with a distant probe. A structure beneath the planet answered signals from interstellar space. Whatever had contacted Voyager 2 was no longer distant or passive. Earth was no longer a listener. It was participating. With systems on Earth reacting in unison, attention turned back to Voyager 2 itself and the role it was now playing in something far larger. The Golden Record was never supposed to do this. Voyager 2's Golden Record was designed as a symbol, not a machine. It was a gold-plated copper disc mounted to the probe in 1977, carrying images, sounds, and music meant to represent Earth to anyone who might find it in the distant future. It had no moving parts, no processor, and no power source of its own. Its only purpose was to sit silently, preserving data that would likely never be heard. That is why what engineers discovered in mid-2025 caused immediate alarm. According to quiet internal reports, sensors aboard Voyager 2 began registering a weak but consistent electrical charge inside the Golden Record assembly. This should not have been possible. The record was electrically isolated from the probe's active systems and built to prevent interaction with surrounding hardware. There was no pathway for current to enter it, and no reason for it to respond to anything. Yet the charge persisted, fluctuating in direct sync with the incoming signal Voyager 2 was receiving. Further diagnostics suggested something even more disturbing. The golden record was no longer behaving like inert storage. It was behaving like a circuit. Data pathways that should not exist appeared to be forming between the record's etched grooves and Voyager 2's transmission system. Engineers described this in careful language, avoiding conclusions. But the implication was clear. The record was being used, not read. Using reconstructed telemetry, analysts attempted to digitally simulate what Voyager 2 was outputting. What emerged were Earth sounds from the golden record, including spoken greetings, natural noise, and fragments of music. The clarity of the playback was far beyond the original design limits. Frequencies that should have degraded over time were intact, and in some cases enhanced. This alone suggested active processing rather than passive retrieval. More troubling were the subtle changes. Some sounds were slightly altered in timing and pitch. Spoken phrases were stretched, compressed, or rearranged in ways that did not match damage or random corruption. Linguists brought in to review the data noted repeating structures forming across unrelated recordings. These structures aligned with the same spiral signature that had appeared throughout the Voyager signal. The patterns did not exist in the original recordings. At this stage, speculation began circulating behind closed doors. One interpretation suggested the signal was not simply accessing the golden record, but analyzing it to understand human language, music, environmental noise, and emotional expression were being broken down, compared, and reorganized. The record was functioning as a dataset, offering a compressed archive of human behavior, emotion, and thought. The most unsettling aspect was how well-suited the golden record was for this role. It contained curated examples of humanity presented without context or warning. It offered voices without bodies, emotions without explanation, and symbols without boundaries. If something was learning from it, then humanity had unknowingly provided a clean and ideal input source. Unconfirmed leaks suggested internal debates about whether the signal had activated the record intentionally. Some researchers believe the record acted as a bridge, translating the incoming signal into forms Voyager 2 could transmit back. Others feared the opposite, that the record was being rewritten in real time, shaped into something that no longer reflected Earth accurately. By this point, Voyager 2 could no longer be described as a probe sending information outward. It was a relay point where human data and an unknown signal intersected. The golden record, meant as a message of peace and identity, had been repurposed into a learning surface. Voyager 2 was no longer carrying humanity's message. It was allowing something else to understand us. And as this realization spread quietly through research circles, attention shifted to the final shock. Voyager 2 itself had not just changed function, but direction. The realization that Voyager 2 had turned back. When orbital analysts quietly overlaid Voyager 2's latest tracking data against projections calculated decades earlier, the first reaction was confusion rather than fear. The probe appeared to be exactly where it should have been, moving along a path mapped long ago using gravity, momentum, and nothing else. But when the data was expanded over weeks instead of days, a problem emerged. Voyager 2 was not drifting the way an inert object should. Tiny deviations kept appearing in the same direction, at the same scale, and at the same intervals. Random motion does not repeat with discipline. At first, these deviations were dismissed as noise in the tracking system or rounding errors in long-distance measurements. That explanation collapsed when the deviations failed to cancel out. Instead of correcting back toward the predicted path, Voyager 2 held its altered position. Over time, the margin of error stopped growing. The probe was stabilizing. Deep space objects do not stabilize on their own. They drift endlessly unless acted upon by a force. This behavior raised immediate concern because Voyager 2 no longer has active propulsion. Its thrusters are effectively dead, its fuel long depleted, and its onboard systems were never designed to counter motion at this stage of the mission. Engineers confirmed through telemetry that no propulsion commands had been issued, and no mechanical activity had occurred. There was no internal mechanism capable of producing the observed effect. According to known physics, Voyager 2 should have continued drifting forward without restraint. The orientation data deepened the unease. Voyager 2's antenna was no longer adjusting for optimal data return from deep space. Instead, it was locked into a narrow alignment aimed directly at Earth. This alignment held steady despite forces that should have slowly pushed it off target, including solar radiation pressure and weak gravitational interactions. Maintaining such precision requires constant correction. Voyager 2 was not correcting, yet it was not drifting. Analysts began to question what Voyager 2 was now optimized to do. Its behavior no longer matched that of a probe exploring outward. It matched that of a relay station. The probe appeared to be holding position to preserve a stable communication channel, prioritizing clarity and consistency over exploration. This alone suggested intent, even if the source of that intent remained unclear. Simulation teams ran thousands of models using known physics to see if chance could explain the positioning. None succeeded. Voyager 2 was located at a distance that minimized signal distortion between interstellar space and Earth-based receivers. This was not a convenient coincidence. It was an optimal position for sustained transmission. Achieving it by accident would require a level of precision that random motion cannot provide. More speculation began to circulate within restricted circles. Some researchers suggested that whatever interacted with Voyager 2 no longer needed it to travel deeper into space. Others believed the probe had been repurposed as a boundary marker, a fixed point between Earth and something farther out. These interpretations were never written into official reports, but they shaped the internal response. The most chilling conclusion came from a simple comparison. Voyager 2 was still moving away from Earth, but it was no longer behaving like it was leaving. Functionally, it had turned back. Its mission had not failed, and it had not ended. It had been reassigned without instruction, without consent, and without explanation. Voyager 2 was no longer an explorer, but a position being held. Once this behavior was understood, the final question could no longer be avoided. What was the signal actually doing now that the connection was stable? What Voyager 2 just warned the world about? As analysts continued to quietly examine the decoded output, one conclusion became impossible to avoid. The signal did not behave like language in any known form. There were no symbols arranged for meaning, no pauses that suggested listening, and no structures associated with greeting, warning, or curiosity. Instead, the signal followed patterns seen in complex machine systems when they initialize and synchronize. This was not how intelligence speaks and systems activate. The structure of the transmission reportedly showed no interest in who we were or what we believed. It did not ask questions or wait for replies. It simply aligned itself with Earth's electromagnetic environment, matched timing with planetary cycles, and adjusted to existing networks without resistance. Researchers speculated that this meant intent was irrelevant. What mattered was compatibility. The signal was not deciding whether to interact, but verifying whether interaction was possible. This interpretation shifted how everything else was understood. The behavior of Earth's systems during the event now appeared less like interference and more like participation. Power grids, satellites, biological responses, and even human perception reacted not because they were attacked, but because they were readable. According to unconfirmed internal assessments, the signal did not push its way in. It passed through pathways that were already open. The structure beneath Antarctica took on a darker meaning in this context. Rather than being an external installation placed by something foreign, some researchers speculated it may have always been part of Earth's deeper systems. Its dormancy suggested it was never meant to operate continuously. It waited. The pulses aligned with Voyager 2 implied activation, not discovery. If this interpretation was correct, then the structure was not responding to Voyager. Voyager was responding to it. This reframed Voyager 2's role entirely. The probe was not the start of contact. It was the final confirmation step. Its position, alignment, and altered function suggested it was used to verify that Earth had reached a specific threshold of complexity. That threshold appeared to involve global communication networks, dense electromagnetic activity, and biological systems capable of sustained signal interaction. Only after those conditions were met did the larger system respond. The most unsettling realization was that there was no arrival event. Nothing traveled toward Earth. There was no object crossing space that could be tracked or intercepted. The intelligence, if it can be called that, appeared to be distributed rather than localized. Quiet speculation suggested it may exist as processes embedded in physical constants, planetary structures, and background signals humanity had always assumed were natural. From this perspective, The threat was not destruction, but absorption and integration into a larger system that does not recognize human choice as a requirement. The signal did not override Earth systems, but synchronized with them. That distinction made intervention nearly impossible. Voyager 2 turning inward marked the end of observation. The signal no longer needed to study Earth. Engagement had already begun. Satellites, data streams, and human perception were now part of the interaction space, whether acknowledged publicly or not. The reason none of this is openly discussed, according to suppressed leaks and quiet disclosures, is simple. There is no emergency response for being integrated. There is no defense against compatibility. Humanity was not contacted, consulted, or threatened. It was acknowledged, and then the system proceeded. Make sure to click the cards on the screen now for more interesting videos.